and literature. He actually challenged the eraser of Palestinian life, memory, and culture. His work documented Palestinian life, history, trauma, and resistance, asserting the Palestinians' presence and right to narrate their own story. Also, in novels like Returning to Haifa, explores the profound rupture of the Nakba, which happened in 1948 when Israel was established after the expulsion of nearly 700,000 Palestinians from their own land. Also, his analysis of settler colonialism is very, very rigorous, where he analyzed Zionism not as a return, but as a European colonial settler movement displacing and replacing the indigenous Palestinian population. His political writing, for example, the 1936 to 1939 revolt in Palestine, dissected the political economy and the structure of this colonialism. Also, he talked about different topics such as violence, dispossession, revolutionary praxis, and armed struggle. Actually, he was the spokesperson of a faction, a Palestinian faction, the Liberation Front of Palestine. And also, he critiqued of internalized colonialism and defeatism like Fanon, like Cabral, like any writer from what is so-called third world scholars. The issue with Ghassan Kanafani, he is not known like Cabral, like writers from India, right? Jose Rizal from Philippines, is that he insisted not to write in the colonizer's language. He insisted to write in his own language. And this is a great thing on the one hand, and again, it may have contributed into the suppression of his voice as a thinker, a philosopher, and novelist. And we're going to explore his existence in the canon and the way he was reproduced in English and his influence and the influence of his writing compared to Fanon, Cabral, Jose Rizal, and others. So I'm going to make another quick introduction and the framework that I'm using in my study, Bourdieu's sociology, and how Palestinian resistant literature and translation are dealt with in the field of translation literature worldwide. And then I'll delve into Kanafani's work and background, Kanafani's work in English, and the reproduction and consecration of Kanafani's Men in the Sun, which is Kanafani's Men in the Sun, Rijal fi Shams, is Kanafani's masterpiece, where he narrates and depicts 3 generations of Palestinians who were dispossessed, who were kicked out from their own land, and how they look for survival. Men in the Sun is actually a very great work by Ghassan Kanafani. He is critiquing actually not only the colonizer, but also the colonized. Although he is a colonized, he has solidarity with his own people, but this does not exempt the writing from saying truth to all. And this actually what distinguishes Ghassan Kanafani. He's like a physician giving real diagnosis of disease and giving and opening horizons for remedy. And then I'll end with conclusions. I think this talk will take 30 minutes. So I start with Salma Al-Khadra Al-Jayyusi, who is a great literature documenter, as it were. In her anthology of modern Palestinian literature, Jayyusi points out that there are 2 literatures in Palestine. That of the writers still living on the soil of the historical land of Palestine, and that of writers living in the diaspora. Now, Ghassan Kanafani belongs to the second, the writers who lived in diaspora. And there are differences between both categories. These are the pictures now. From the top left, we have Jabra Ibrahim Jabra, who actually is very important writer, translator, and literary critic. And we have Emil Habibi to the right, and we have Mahmoud Darwish, and we have Ghassan Kanafani. These are four main figures of Palestinian literature, and Ghassan Kanafani was a pioneer because he opened the way for all the three and all people who came after to have a literature. He wrote, as we are going to see, a book on the resistance literature in the occupied land while he was in Beirut, because in Beirut, which was a hub of publishing in the Arab world, he promoted resistance literature, and this is why actually the coinage of the term resistance literature was at the same time of committed literature coming from existentialist writers. So in her modern Palestinian literature, Salma Al-Khadr Al-Jayusi talks about Ghassan Kanafani a lot, and she translated a lot of his work into English as a great writer and pioneer who gave Palestinian literature after Nakba a shape. Thematically speaking, according to Salma Al-Khadr Al-Jayusi, Palestinian literature can be divided into two categories: Nakba literature and resistance literature, and there is very important distinction between both. The Nakba literature documented the sorrows and the calamities that took place during the Nakba. And resistance literature is the literature that emerged as a response to the Nakba. If Nakba literature was sad, full of sorrow, the resistance literature was angry and full of power to resist. So we can say that resistance literature led by Ghassan Kanafani, Mahmoud Darwish, Emil Habibi can also be called decolonial literature. And the post-colonial term does not apply here because we are still under occupation, and the genocide taking place now is known for people around the world. So in the former, writers lament the catastrophe that was inflicted on their nation and led to the 1948 expulsion. In the latter, the decolonial literature, writers emerged from the trauma with mission to promote resilience in their writing, and Ghassan Kanafani, Mahmoud Darwish are good examples of this. However, these two categories of literature in Palestine are interrelated. Unlike the writers who remained inside Palestine and whose literary production did not find its way out, writers in the diaspora, Ghassan Kanafani is one of them, were able to acquire more capital in the culture production scene in the Arab world. A lot of capitals in the Arab world actually gave space to writers like Ghassan Kanafani and his colleagues like Jabra Ibrahim Jabra. Ghassan Kanafani was in Beirut, Jabra Ibrahim Jabra was in Baghdad, and they benefited from the national support at that time in the 70s and 80s. So those who remained inside Palestine, like Mahmoud Darwish, who was actually one of the most internationally acclaimed Palestinian writers, contends that these writers, including himself, remained unknown until Ghassan Kanafani declared their presence, resilience, and talent. Actually, Mahmoud Darwish, Emil Habibi remained inside Palestine, and they were suffocated by Israeli censorship. And it was difficult for them to be known around the world. It was Ghassan Kanafani actually who collected their work, critiqued, and offered promotion and endorsement of their work, and afterwards they became famous. So after Ghassan Kanafani coined the term resistance literature, it acquired capital in Arabic and then later in English when Barbara Harlow, the Texas University professor, drew on Kanafani's work and authored a monograph under the title Resistance Literature. And in their book, Barbara Harlow drew similarities between Ghassan Kanafani, Ngugo wa Thiong'o, Cabral, Fanon, and my explanation of why Ghassan Kanafani did not acquire fame as or standing such as Fanon and Cabral and other writers is actually he insisted to write in Arabic. And we are going to talk about why he did not acquire such a space or a place or a position in world literature, simply because even when he was translated, he was not well circulated. Also, he suffered from intellectual and literary siege. His literature was embargoed, as Edward Said has once written in an essay under embargoed, that under the title embargoed literature. So I'm going to touch quickly upon the Bourdieu sociology, the framework I used. I used the Bourdieu sociology because it helps us to understand how a field, how literature as a field, to use Bourdieu's terms, is shaped. I will start with the word field, the term field, which is a state of the power relations among the agents or institutions engaged in the struggle. And in his application of the field in the translation studies, Professor Sameh Hanna defines field as a structured space of possible positions which are occupied by agents. Agents can be translators, publishers, writers, reviewers. Unlike similar concepts such as system, the concept of the field is dynamic, and this is very important. The concept of the field is dynamic and keeps changing. The second term which I'm using is the habitus, which is the systems of durable, transposable dispositions, structures, predisposed to function as structuring structures. This is the definition of Bourdieu's of the word habitus. It is another dynamic concept that enables researchers to investigate the translator's behavior in light of an amalgam of factors, including his or her schooling.
Professor Mahmoud, let me say one sentence. Present in the offline and also online, some are not from sociology or social sciences and probably never read Bourdieu. So, as such, Bourdieu's definition is very difficult to understand. So, you explain kindly Bourdieu's habitus and field with examples. Because we are interdisciplinary centers, so there are a lot of people from science and technology.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I'm going to explain it. I know it's very difficult to grasp because it's also a translation from French. So there are structures, and when we talk about the translator's habitus, it is not only shaped. The habitus is the ways people structure their position in life, in the field. So according to Hanna, the translator's habitus is not only shaped by the professional field of translation, but is also open to transformation and restructuring by historical experiences gained outside the realm of the professional life. So when we talk about habitus, we talk about the context in which a translator moves, the ways in which the translator, he or she, actually formulates his views on what to translate, what not to translate, how to use, for instance, paratext. If a translator is having a text and he wants to engage with the text because he's a human being, he's an intellectual. The translator is not only a conduit who only transfers things without interaction. So his habitus actually influences the ways in which he deals with the text. If he wants to be loyal, if we take the term loyalty in translation to the text or to the translator or to the writer or to the reader. Now, if the translator is an intellectual and he believes in something or he cherishes certain views or ideologies, and he, on the one hand, does not want to interfere with the text, he might engage with the text in paratexts, in footnotes, in prefaces, introductions, and sometimes interviews. Sometimes a translator would translate a book, and over time he formulates and have his own or her own views on the book. he doesn't want to engage with the book in the text of the translation. He goes for a review. He makes a review and he publishes it. And this review can be published separately or included in the volume that is out in the target language. The third term is capital, with a social, economic, or cultural, however, is the resource that social actors have available to them and that enable them to promote their own standing in a society or a given field, including their ideas, people associated with them. Caste, in less technical terms, social actors, including translators, are enabled by capital to exercise power within social networks and mobilize resources towards their objectives in society. So, through their capital, translators can help change the field or endorse certain things and suppress others. I think I would go immediately now to Palestinian resistance literature, decolonial literature in translation. Now, Palestinian resistance literature is literature written by Palestinian writers inside or outside Palestine, and which has been largely, according to Harlow in her book Resistance Literature, has been largely excluded or ignored, specifically if it is written in languages rather than the lingua franca, i.e. English or French. So this is a very important note. And here comes the importance of the translation of Men in the Sun by Kilpatrick, the Oxford University lecturer, who tried to give Ghassan Kanafani some space in English by translating his work Men in the Sun, but it was too late. It was not well circulated. It was not given a space in the field of English literature for the reasons we are going to explore shortly. Kanafani's seminal work, Literature of Resistance in Occupied Palestine from 1948 to 1966, أدب المقاومة في فلسطين المحتلة من 1948 إلى 1966, was the first monograph to be published on Palestinian resistance or decolonial literature, and in which actually he promoted writers like Mahmoud Darwish. Mahmoud Darwish used to joke and says that without Ghassan Kanafani's battle promoting us, the world would have never known us inside Palestine because of the Israeli censorship on their work in the 60s. The second work by Ghassan Kanafani is Resistant Palestinian Literature Under Occupation, which is also another masterpiece, الأدب الفلسطيني المقاوم تحت الاحتلال. And actually, Barbara Harlow drew on these two books to write her resistance literature. Like Arabic literature in general, Palestinian literature, resistance literature, is generally not well presented in English. I mentioned in the first minutes of this talk that Edward Said once wrote an essay on embargoed literature, and he talked about Arabic literature in general and Palestinian literature in particular, where literature written by Palestinians is not given venues in metropolis. And this is not only because of the overall marginality of translation in contemporary Anglo-American culture. Yes, this is a known fact that the Anglo-American culture is not interested in translation, and this is one fact, or the fact that translation into English more broadly is underpaid, critically unrecognized, but also because this particular literature does not conform to the existing habitus of the dominant institutions positioned within the field of cultural production in the Anglophone and European space. Now we come to Ghassan Kanafani as an example of embargoed literature because it doesn't conform. Kanafani was born, I told you, that to a middle class family in 1936 in the city of Acre. sorry, I mentioned Yafa. No, it's Acre, Akka. Due to the 1948 Nakba, he was a 12-year-old boy. He found himself, along with his family, forced to live in exile. He had to move from one Arab capital to another, Beirut, Damascus, Kuwait, and finally Beirut, where he was settled in 1960 until his assassination by Israel in 1972. So, Ghassan Kanafani, we could say that he was assassinated twice. His work did not find its way out to the world, and also he was physically assassinated in 1972 by an explosion of his car. In Beirut, he produced most of his literary works, including his major novellas, Men in the Sun, 1962, All That Is Left to You, 1966, and Returning to Haifa. And this trilogy is very, very important. Each one of them actually discusses one aspect, and they are easy to read. They are not so long, but they are so condensed. Now we come to Ghassan Kanafani's work in English. Although he formally entered the literary field in the early 60s with publication of his short story, The Death of Bed Number 12, which was actually translated into English by a famous translator, but again, it didn't get circulated. It took his major literary works scores of years to appear in English or to well circulate in English. Because of the field of literature in English, and we talk about translation as one mode of cultural production, is characterized by its dynamic reconfiguration, and because it is always in a state of flux and always susceptible to re-hierarchization, Kanafani's literary works found a way to the English literary market. However, it was so meager, so thin presence. Nevertheless, the reconfiguration can take time, hence the belatedness of translating his major works into English. Men in the Sun, which was published in 1962, was translated in 1978. All That Is Left to You, 1966, was translated in 1993. Returning to Haifa, 1969, was translated into English in 2000. And all of these, as we are going to see, were translated and circulated by small publishers. None of the major publishers in the English-speaking world and here actually gave support or endorsed or published one of these novellas. Kanafani's culture production is comparable to that of Fanon, Wathingo, Achibi, Salman Rushdie, Cabral, who are discussed in similar terms in Harlow 1987, I mean her book on resistance literature. Kanafani's work in English, he is mentioned on equal footing with influential Western writers that like in their introduction to his work, Riley and Harlow reiterate what James Joyce did for Dublin or William Faulkner for the US South. Kanafani in his stories has provided for Palestine. But again, Harlow and Riley, all professors from English-speaking world, despite their efforts to promote Kanafani's work in such terms, putting him in equal footing with William Faulkner, James Joyce, again, his work is not studied, is not examined. And I once gave a talk at SOAS, the School of Oriental and African Studies in London, and one of the professors told me that what you are saying is not accurate regarding the presence of Ghassan Kanafani. He is very present in English circles. My response to him, you are at SOAS, and SOAS is a great hub for Middle Eastern studies. And people ought to know Ghassan Kanafani, but if you go beyond SOAS, if you go beyond your department, people do not know Ghassan Kanafani very well. I know there is a slow movement of recognition of Ghassan Kanafani in the English-speaking world, but not if you just make a quick search of work on his works or papers or dissertations in his work and compare them to the works conducted on Kanafani, on Fanon, for instance, and you see the difference. So, reproduction and consecration of Kanafani's Men in the Sun. I think I touched upon these elements. Edward Said contends that Men in the Sun, Ghassan Kanafani's masterpiece, is Kanafani's finest work and one of the subtlest and most powerful of modern novelists. Yet recognition of Kanafani's literary talent in English was evident before Said's endorsement. We know that. In 1975, Hilary Kilpatrick from Oxford University delivered a lecture at Cambridge University that was later published as an article under the title Commitment and Literature, the Case of Ghassan Kanafani. Here, Men in the Sun is celebrated as a very high quality work that does not only portray the Palestinian plight in remarkably forthright terms, but also demonstrates lasting literary creations, according to Kilpatrick 1976, way before Edward Said's endorsement. Aware of the fact that Kanafani is overwhelmingly framed in the West as a political leader, she strives, Kilpatrick, to foreground his literary capital in her articles as well as in the introduction to her translation of Men in the Sun. Connected to this is her attempt to domesticate the text itself so that it and its writer can be given access to the international literary field. And let me highlight this and here the importance and the seriousness of translation work from the translator. Ghassan Kanafani was perceived as a radical writer by the West, speaking a spokesperson for a faction that is declared terrorist organization during the time. Now, because of this, people avoided publishing his work, avoided talking to him, avoided promoting his work. So when Kilpatrick translated Men in the Sun, she made some changes to make Men in the Sun accessible or acceptable by Western audiences. And here is the importance of how things are done in order to give a writer an entry into the field, which is very problematic. I mean the field of English in literature, not English literature, English literature in English, So the use of introductions in translated works may signal the producer's resolve to promote the author and his text. And this is what Kilpatrick said. She strove to give Kanafani a place in the field of English literature. And here she experimented with the habitus in order to give him capital in the field. The translation of the three major novellas of Kanafani are preceded with introductions, and this tells us something about the translator who wanted Kanafani to be known, recognized, and celebrated in English. Hence the importance of the introduction on the part of translators. Now, Men in the Sun features a 6-page introduction by the translator. A collection of stories that, including Returning to Haifa, features a 15-page introduction by Riley and Harlow that is preceded by a 12-page biographical essay. And by the way, paratexts are heavily discussed in translation studies. There are books written and articles written on paratexts, either promoting and celebrating the text in translation or suppressing it. I remember Samuel Huntington's book, The Clash of Civilizations, was translated into Arabic. It was introduced by a 60-something page preface that refutes the tenets of this book. So the translators, the Arab translators who translated Samuel Huntington's actually destroyed the issues, destroyed the tenets, or destroyed the ideas of Huntington's even before the reading start. The novella, All That Is Left to You, begins with a 10-page introduction by Roger Allen, who is a professor at Pennsylvania University. And actually, if you want to have a look at the efforts of people who translated or who strove to translate Palestinian literature into English, Roger Allen is one of them. The Status of Men in the Sun is a highly influential work which is flagged in the 3 introductions. So wherever you go in the translation of Ghassani's work, whether it is Men in the Sun or other novellas, Men in the Sun is still a main theme, a main element in the introductions of the translators. So in bodies and terms, translators and critics enable an author to attain cultural capital, while institutions grant him or her access to social capital. And here is the issue with the publishing houses that published Ghassan Kanafani. We've mentioned that there are small publishers who actually specialize in promoting Palestinian literature, but they don't have, if you go for Waterstones, to Waterstones in London, you wouldn't find Ghassan Kanafani's work on the front shelves. You need to dig deep in order to find them in bookstores in the metropoles. And actually, I tried this in New York and in Waterstones in London, different borders, and I don't remember this big stores in New York. I didn't find Ghassan Kanafani as I would easily find other writers like Spivak, for example, Gatri Spivak, and Salman Rushdie, Cabral, Fanon, Jose Rizal, etc. So I come to conclude that the new forms of capital around which the field of literature English had been reconfigured provide a passage for Kanafani and his work into the field of literature in English, yet this passage is narrow, and the drive to reproduce Kanafani's work, specifically Men in the Sun, proceeded through turbulent terrains. All in all, attempts to canonize or to decanonize the English field, the literature and English field, by giving way to Ghassan Kanafani in English, resulted in a modest social and cultural capital for him in English. He is consecrated, of course, studied, yet studies about his work are not concomitant to his acknowledged status as an accomplished literary author. Generally, the reproduction of Kanafani's works in English can be divided into 3 phases. The first starts in 1961 and ends with Kanafani's death in 1972. In this period, Kanafani produced the bulk of his work, and none of his major works was translated. It seems to me that Kanafani was not interested in promoting himself into the world. He was just talking to his own people. And this is something actually in need to be examined. Why? Although he studied at French school as a middle class boy, he mastered French early on in his life. He could have written like Fanon in French. The second phase extended from 1972 to 1999, where his major works, including the 3 novellas, including Men in the Sun, were reproduced in English, and this period is characterized by the fact that the political dimension of his life was downplayed in favor of the literary one. The third phase extends from 2000s onwards. During this phase, critical attention to Kanafani's work in English grew, and a new generation of researchers began to examine his work in English translation. Several factors may be behind the uneven and rather limited consecration of Kanafani and his work in English. First, his shortened life. This is one important aspect. He died, or he was killed while he was 36 years old. People know his work, believe that he's a genius, producing all this work by the age of 36. If had he lived longer, it is possible that he would have accumulated more cultural and social capital and potentially secured a greater position as a literary writer in the international arena. Second, Kanafani did not produce novels but novellas. His masterpiece, Men in the Sun, is only a 74-page. He is prolific in terms of the range of topics and genres. He actually produced drama, and he's a playwright as well. He approached, and his innovative experimentation with narrative techniques was formidable. Third, dominant cultural institutions did not adopt Kanafani and his work. The publishers who undertook the mission of reproducing Kanafani's work in English are quite small, and while they might enjoy a certain amount of capital, it was not enough to ensure wider circulation of his work. Fourth, Kanafani did not write immediately in the foreign language. As we mentioned, he mastered the French, but he insisted to write in Arabic. Fifth, those who strove to consecrate him enjoyed restricted access to the cultural field. Apart from Edward Said, nearly all of those involved in reproducing Kanafani's works are translators with limited capital in their own right, and thus could not only contribute to so much to the circulation of Kanafani and his work. Yeah, we gave the example of Johnson Davis, a famous translator, did not undertake to translate any work of Kanafani's after his translation of The Death of Bed Number 12. Even Said himself did not dedicate full studies to Kanafani's work as he did with other writers, actually. He only mentions him in passing in several locations in a number of his works. It's true that Kanafani and his work were eventually admitted into the field of literature in English to the extent that the established doxa would partly allow, or indeed cannot totally obliterate, decolonial literature written by Ghassan Kanafani. But this does not mean, however, that Kanafani is effectively consecrated and promoted and endorsed in the field of literature in English. Consecration takes more than one instance of recognition. Thank you.
Right. Good afternoon, sir. I actually have a question, if that's okay.
Professor Mahmoud, we are entering an answer, question, a Q&A. So he has a question.
Yeah, Professor Mahmoud, I have a question. Thank you for the lecture. So I was just wondering, from the historical perspective, what have you observed in the last 2 years since this Israel-Palestine war? Do you think there has been an interesting dimension of the workers who are right now in Palestine and working from Palestine? Any interesting work that has come, or any interesting observation you can say about what's happening there, from a literal perspective?
Well, thank you very much for the question, and thanks again for attending the talk. The situation now in Palestine is very dire. It's very problematic. My family is back there. My brother, who is 65 years old, he lost his all family except 2 of his kids. He lost 22. 5 kids, 3 daughters with their kids. It's really, they bombed the whole 4-story building over their heads. Simple. There is literary writer. There are literary writers. There is literature written on Palestine, but it is not enough to portray the volume of misery, the volume of starvation. We are actually stunned how Israel went that far as human beings. Sometimes, I must tell you this, sometimes I feel sorry for the Israelis. How much cruelty you cannot imagine a person, a human being, would dedicate a bombing of a house through digital means to his daughter on her birthday. Do you know that Israeli soldiers, before they bomb the house, they video themselves and they laugh and they say, this is to my fiance, this is to my daughter in her birthday. This is really stunning and it's really heartbreaking. You need a totally new literature to describe what's happening there in Palestine. I have a friend actually who wrote, you might have heard of his name, Dr. Rifat Al-Arair. He was professor of English at the university back home in Gaza, and he wrote this famous poem, If I Must Die. Because he wrote this poem, he was assassinated. And they called him. They called him live. They said, we're going to kill you. And they killed him. When they assassinated Ghassan Kanafani, it took time until people had document that show that he was assassinated by the Mossad, by the Israeli intelligence services. But now the Israeli intelligence service declare what they're doing.
Yeah, what they
They
did.
are not hiding it.
What they did to that young, what you call it, the reporter, the journalist.
The journalist.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah, I think they informed them that they're going to be assassinated, and they just killed them.
Of course. Yeah. And they declare it, they announce it. In the past, they would be harassed by media in order to say that they killed, and they wouldn't say they killed, although the blueprints of their works are there. Now they, immediately after they kill people, they say, we killed them, and we intended to kill them. You know that since the first world wars, the number of journalists killed in Palestine is more than the number of journalists killed in modern wars combined. You are now talking about 250 journalists. University professors are countless. Yeah, so actually we need a whole new literature to describe the new Nakba. And the Israelis for a long time, they denied the term Nakba, catastrophe. Now they say we are inflicting a new Nakba. And each 50 years we should inflict a Nakba on Palestinians.
Thank you for
Yeah.
But we have the question, yes.
Sir, if I could ask something in connection to that.
Yeah.
So when we are talking about, resistance and given this mass destruction going on around in the world today, how should we understand and practice resilience?
Sorry, can you say it again?
Yes, so my question is, given this mass destruction going on around the world in today's time, how can we understand and practice resilience?
Oh, yes. Thank you very much. Thank you. Well, your question is about how people practice resilience in Palestine, right?
Yes.
If I hear you well. Yeah, well, let me take my story as something to explain things. I am number 11 in my family. I am the only one who is outside Gaza. My 10 siblings, 5 brothers, 5 sisters, and I am the youngest. So my oldest brother is 75 now. So my 10 siblings with their kids and grandkids, before the war, the Israeli war in Gaza, they were in one place or two places, which is the northern of Gaza. Now they are on streets. Simple. They are on streets. Sometimes I tell my kids, remember, there is no electricity in Gaza for the last 2 years. There is no light. Let alone talking about water, let alone talking about basic needs of life. How they are accommodating or adapting to this is the aspect of resilience that Palestinians have been learning over years, over 76, 77 years of occupation and deprivation. I don't say that we are I don't say that we are practicing resilience only for the last 2 years. Israel has been practicing occupation, deprivation, dispossession over the last 77 years. The thing with the world is that the world only notices what's happening when there is something so big. But Israel was, as Ilan Pape, the Israeli historian, said that it was practicing ethnic cleansing over the last 77 years, but with a slow motion. Now the motion is accelerated. Over the last 2 years, it only accelerated. So the techniques of resilience are there, but again, the situation is so dire. People are tired, I tell you, are extremely tired, but they are patient. They know how to adapt. They know how to survive. Although survival is not a good word nowadays, we need a new lexicon, a new dictionary to describe what's happening there. I could see that whatever I describe is short of the realities people in Gaza are leading, let alone the realities of people in the West Bank, the Palestinian inside Israel. Israel is doing a lot of things against Palestinians that go unnoticed in the world. I have a question that is written by Satajit here in the chat. It says, do you think in the context of the development of translation studies in Palestinian academia, it has been possible to move from colonized translation feats to a kind of decolonized transcreation activities, specifically in terms of the Palestinian resistance? Yeah, that's very good question. Very good question. Well, over the last 20 years, students in universities are a lot. I'll give an example of 3 universities where I was around. Each university has a department of English that at least has 1,000 students. So you talk about 3,000 students in 2 square kilometers studying English or French or German. These are the main languages in the world. So I can talk about a generation of Palestinian writers who write in different languages, English and Arabic and French, and who actually like Arundhati Roy, for instance. And Arundhati Roy, by the way, is an example for Palestinian young writers. Did I pronounce her name well, Arundhati Roy?
Yeah, correct. Correct.
Yeah. Yes. So there is a generation of Palestinian writers who actually take seriously the decolonial mission of literature, and they write. And one example of this is a book under the title Gaza Writes Back, which was edited by Professor Rifat Al-Arair and was actually written, short stories written by students from Gaza. It's a very important book, and you can find it on the internet. You can buy it through Amazon. Gaza Writes Back by Rifat Al-Arair. You know that he is drawing on The Empire Writes Back, the title. So yes, there is a generation of Palestinian young writers who actually taking decolonization of literature into serious consideration in their writing. And they speak their voice and they inject their texts with Arabic words from Palestine. Yes, go on.
Thank you. She's from our university, SNE, Sister Nivedita. Go ahead.
Yes. Actually, you kind of partly answered the question that I had with regards to the question that you answered right now, because whereas you were lecturing, so thank you very much. It's really wonderful. What I was struck by was the irony of English being the tool to spread the voice of Kanafani, and it is the English-speaking world which has to scaffold him for his voice to reach the wider world. And it's interesting. It's very laudable, rather, or encouraging, as you said, that now the Palestinians themselves are writing, and they have, to a certain extent, been able to acquire the social and cultural capital I suppose, when they are writing from within the English world and they are striking back. So initially my question was, how is decolonization working? So you answered that part of the question. I guess my other part of the question is, given the current scenario, especially in the West and especially in the US, the way we are seeing the kind of pressure that is being exercised on university and university students, how do you think the process of decolonization and this whole business of resistance literature from the perspective of postcolonial studies and decolonization studies would have to be perhaps rethought or restructured, or can it go on with the same strategies that it did earlier on?
Yeah, thank you very much. This is a very good question, and thanks for the comment. We had a novelist from Scotland back in May, and she mentioned she writes in English. She's a Sudanese, she's an Arab writer, and she writes in English. And somebody asked her, why don't you write in Arabic? She said, well, Arabic is a great language and it is not going to diminish if I don't write in it. It's spoken by nearly 500 million speakers. And there are a lot of writers in Arabic. Unlike Ngugu Wathingo, who preferred to write in his own language because he believed that it's a minority language that should be cherished. Now, when you talk about Wathingo, Chinua Achebe, Layla Abul Ula, Edward Said, you have different perspectives on writing on the language of the colonizer. Now, when Edward Said wrote Orientalism and Culture and Imperialism, when Ijaz Ahmad wrote his book on nations, they wrote in English, right? But they promoted their own ideas through this language. So, like Chinua Achebe, Edward Said, Ijaz Ahmad, Arundhati Roy, Salman Rushdie, in order to do a decolonization, writing in both languages, the native language and the colonizer's language are important. They should go hand in hand in order to have a space, in order to have a say in the world arena of intellectual production. This is one thing. The other thing, you talked about the movement, the campus sit-ins in the US. I should take you back to 2005, when Palestinian academics directed a call for world academics to boycott, divest, and sanction Israeli academia that support occupation. Now, I think in 2025, after 20 years of work and writing and petitioning, I could see that the campus solidarity campaigns in Europe and US, as a result of accumulative academic decolonial writing by professors around the world, including Ilan Pape, Avish Lime, Mona Baker in Manchester University, and many, many others. Arundhati Roy, she's very activist, actually. So these people who are sitting down in solidarity with Palestinians in campus actually are the results of accumulative decolonial activism through writing paperwork, researches, and petitions that were produced and signed over the last 20 years. So what we are seeing now is not out of the blue, actually is a result of laborious work by academics, writers, researchers, like Noor Salha, for instance, at the University of Edinburgh, I think.
Thank you so much.
Professor.
Hello.
Hello.
Yeah, hello, I'm listening.
Yeah, I've just posted a question. My name is Ashok Thakur. This is about the dehumanizing process that always comes from a colonial war, especially in the Second World War, we saw that, and is currently being reenacted, not only by the Israelis, but those Western colonial power or new colonial power who has been abject in their support to the Israeli aggression. So do we see the current Palestinian literature reflecting this kind of rise of dehumanization through during the war and the resistance to it? Is there any particular literature which reflects this?
Yes. Thank you very much. This is very good question. And Palestinian literature, there is focus on three concepts actually. Dehumanization is one of them, and decivilianization is the other, and demonization is the third. So in the current Palestinian literature, people talk about the dehumanization of Palestinians, and I'll tell you something shortly about this in relation to the Israelis. Yes, there is a great deal of examination of the dehumanization of Palestinians, demonization, and decivilization, because for a human being who acts as a soldier, who has a family, you cannot understand the action of presenting the bombing of a house full of people to his daughter or to his fiancée in her birthday without reading this in the context of dehumanization, because he doesn't feel that these people are human beings, deserve life. So there is a media machine that makes this human being who is a soldier deprived of his feeling toward this other human being who is the Palestinian. So he is cherishing the idea that the people, the creatures he's bombing, are not worth living because they are not human beings. They are either demons or animals. In the Israeli media, they talk about rats, they talk about cockroaches, they talk about human animals. The defense minister called Palestinians human animals. So the process of dehumanization is well established in Israeli textbooks, in Israeli media. Now, the irony is that, and I learned this from Professor Farid Al-Attas, Professor Bula. He told me something important in an exchange between me and him about the idea of dehumanization. He said the thing is that when Israelis dehumanize Palestinians, actually they dehumanize themselves.
Sure.
They become non-humans by dehumanizing others.
Just as the Nazis did.
It returns to them. Yeah. So there must be an effort to rehumanize the Israelis.
Absolutely.
In order to help them get out from this abyss.
Tamanna, go ahead, ask your question.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. I'm a research scholar at the Department of English, Jadavpur University, and I'm currently working on this decolonial ideas and everything. So I had a question. So once I was listening to a lecture by Professor Wael B. Hallak, and he was there at Hamad Bin Khalifa University, and he was talking about epistemicide and the idea of lack of morality in the current dimensions of the world system. So, and in the final lines of the novel Men in the Sun, there is this line, why didn't they knock on the walls of the tank? So, and as we were talking about this person and why he didn't write in any other language and why he deliberately restricted himself in Arabic, do you think there is this concept of epistemicide and retaining the morality of the language in the concept when he was definitely and wholeheartedly writing in Arabic?
Well, that's a very good question, and you open the horizon for these concepts. Thank you very much for letting us know that you are doing decolonial studies. These concepts of epistemological justice, epistemological injustice, epistemicide in Palestine, I think all types of sides, epistemicides, genocides, education side, educide, scholasticide. These are terms which are much applicable to the Palestinian situation. When you talk about epistemicide, scholasticide, you could see this on daily basis, bombing libraries, bombing universities, obliterating, making digital disconnection all the time. People cannot tell the world about their situation. There is a lot of things. And also, if you are in the outside world and you want to publish a paper on Palestine, you are not given a space. This paper, if it is not diluted to the standards of Scopus index journals in the West, then your paper, if it calls a spade, it is not published. It is not given permission to be published. And this Harvard journal that invited people to talk about Palestine, and all of a sudden, after papers were accepted, is an example. The whole journal was stopped by Harvard University after papers were sent and ready to publish. All of a sudden, everything was suspended. So there is an act of epistemicide by major media, intellectual, academic outlets in the world.
Kamunda, for your information,
Yes, sir. Yes,
Center
ma'am.
for Interdisciplinary Studies and Research in SNU, actually we are running a series on decolonization of knowledge and decoloniality. So you can
Okay,
come
ma'am.
to us if you have any other issues regarding decolonization and decoloniality. It's glad to know, happy to know that somebody is working in SNU.
Thank you, ma'am. I'll definitely want to be a part of that.
We have another research scholar, Professor Mahmoud from biotechnology. Here is the question.
Hello. Yeah, it was really lovely to listen to your lecture, and we'll be looking forward to a lot of practicalities come into play when people who have directly or indirectly seen what is happening there, or their family is there. So I would like to know that there is what is decolonizing resistance literature. Can the literature part be focused on the massive polluting of funds in pertaining to food and the healthcare part? So there's a lot of babies who are not getting food. So basic needs, which is like water, baby milk, a lot of kids are, their only point of sufferance is there is scarcity of milk, so which is a very basic thing, and those are being looted there. So can focusing the literature on those specific aspects be more so that it can be focused, and so when there is an importance, so that people get to know it, and something can be done in the process. Is that plausible in any way?
Well, yeah, the situation. I'm really relieved that you know these tiny details about starvation and the babies not having milk, not having basic stuff, contaminated water.
Forgive me for interrupting. Well, we know better than anybody because British ruled us for 190 years. And there was no famine during the pre-colonial period. There is not even one famine. But British showed us what famine can be and what famine is. From 1757 to 1947, there are 42 famines in India. You all know about starvation very well.
Yeah.
Maybe not my generation, but the generation before me, my parents.
I'm speechless.
I'm born in free India. So British showed us all the atrocities, including famine, all the abnormalities which British thought normal to impose on us. So we have learned it all. And it is fortunate that we are still seeing what Palestine is doing. And the so-called knowledgeable West silent. So-called knowledgeable West, as usual, the mentors of civilization and
no. They are not silent. They are active.
In supporting Palestine.
They are active participants in this genocidal process. Like the British,
like the
spy planes, which actually provide information to the Israelis to help them bomb specific areas in Gaza.
Right.
So
it's clear.
It's silent. It's being an active. I'm not talking about the American participation.
No,
I'm talking about the French, British, who actually made sure that the Houthis who protested against this kind of genocide got bombed back to hell.
Absolutely, yes. Yeah. There is this phrase in cultural studies about the white race. I don't know whether it's true or not and needs more examination. The white race is cruel race. And wherever the British went, they caused a lot of pain. The thing is, for not so many people around the world understand that Zionism is not Judaism. Zionism is a Western product, a product by imperialism that is actually subjugating and hijacking Judaism for the interests of imperialism. And here is the tiny detail that not all Jews are supporting Israel. Some of the staunch supporters of Palestine are Jews. You talk about Avi Shlaim, Oxford University professor, Ilan Pape, Exeter University professor, Neve Gordon, London University professor. These are all solid scholars who believe that Israel is an apartheid state that is committing genocide, and not today, but for the last 40 years.
Sure.
And they believe that imperialism is still in operation in Palestine. Colonialism, white colonialism, still in operation. And
Israel actually showing us, giving us the how to do all sorts of imperialism, including cultural and
no, but not Israel. I mean, just by focusing on Israel, we are actually forgetting the power behind Israel in doing so. Israel is basically a proxy state for the new imperialism.
Israeli power structure. We want to.
Israel is being maintained in that Middle East to make sure that the Western dominance continues unabated in spite of the popular resistance movement that is spread.
That is also epistemic suicides, epistemic dependence.
Absolutely.
Any other question? Shotojit wrote something in the chat box that can you talk a little about the local leadership of the resistance? Before that, can I ask a question, Shotojit?
Can you say that again? I think I lost connection, Professor Bula.
You have.
He just lost his connection and this.
Okay. With all said and done, Professor Mahmoud, we are actually still not properly, protesting because we have interests with the United States of America. And we haven't actually, I'm calling my Indians not that, vocal in terms of intellectual imperialism or academic epistemicide or decolonization. We, in the school text, we still follow somewhat what we were told and excluded some things. And now we have this Hindutva of this 21st century of the central government. So they are actually rewriting history books, even getting rid of many of things. So I feel, living in India and teaching in India, that we are not doing what we are supposed to do. I must
Thank you very much for the note. Yeah.
I must say one thing, that I'm also very much pissed off to my earlier university, University of Calcutta, which is famous for its existence, and also this one, that decolonization or decoloniality, don't want to talk about. Because of what? Backlash? Or what? Because there is still a hush-hush position on the colonization. The thesis is that white man's burden's thesis, that they are actually civilizing and educating us, continues probably silently, but surreptitiously continuous.
No, but then
Absolutely.
perhaps
Absolutely.
Fanon, that is why Fanon wrote Black Men, White Masks. Basically,
Yes, 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 yes.
understand that is being colonized in our mind, say, is the reason that why we are afraid to protest openly. It's that it's an action of the government
I
is one
slightly
thing.
disagree with you, Professor Thakur. If we are afraid, then we should not say in the seminars and in the, and yes, we are, very decolonizing things. Then we are worse than those who are colonizing. We are actually.
No, that is why Fanon
We are
wrote.
actually then cheating our nation and everybody. Because if we can't say we are not still decolonized properly and we should do it openly, hell with us. I'm sorry. I would say hell with
The
us.
social movements around the world is showing us.
Social, forget about a world for a moment. Let's get local little bit. Local. West Bengal, India. How many decolonized scholars you have? You can even count. I could not get speakers from India very much because decoloniality and decolonization is not their cup of tea. How many people in India, a lot of books, lot of authors translated what Professor Mahmoud has talked about, Kanafani. How many of them are done? Global social movements do not touch us so far. Global social movements started in 1960s onward, and in 1990s with the help of African scholars, Cuisano, Peru, and all of Latin America, huge scholarship has been built on decolonization and decoloniality from Latin America, from Brazil, from Southeast Asia, Philippines, and generally we don't name the nations. Africa is still a continent. But there are a huge number of scholars from Africa. You name one in India, I'm not able to do that. That's scholars on decolonization. There is none. We are 150 crore and we boast of our earlier civilization. So, and we're the classic country of colonization, as Gundil Frank said. That India is the classic country of exploitation and colonization.
I guess from literature there is enough work going on.
No. You translate what literature? No. Except Rabindranath, there have not been translations. Nojul has not been translated. Who was what called? Revolutionary poet. Bidrohi Kavi, revolutionary poet. Where is Nojul's translation? Not a single poem has been translated. So this calls for that, yes, we are critical of Israel, at the same time we are critical of ourselves. What are we doing is a question. If we don't do anything, then we have no right to criticize. This is my position. That I don't think you criticize British, but don't do anything to decolonize. How many of us know original any language of India? None. So I rest my case. I rest my case that there is a need in your own home. Charity begins at what? There is very much need in India to develop this decolonial. The ones actually Professor Mahmoud is talking about. That translating that to English show that how many of us know how many translations of what have been happening in Rabindranath? We don't know. We don't actually want to know because we are very much faced with a colonized. That coloniality is pervading all over. That embedded values everything, and that is what we think. That's all.
Since we have examples, right?
This is example.
Translation studies.
But they haven't translated decolonization. Decolonial literature do exist in original languages, but they have not been translated in English to the extent that people will notice. The only person some of whose literature is translated is Rona, first Nobel Prize holder from Asia, but still not totally. But it exists. But nobody else cares the translation. Professor Mahmoud has, researchers like Professor Mahmoud has given the world a very important tool, translating it to English, so that the English market knows we exist. Now it is a sort of a commodity that if we can translate, we can probably publish. So there is another sort of, what should we say, lollipop to the authors, those who are under colonization still, rather coloniality, in Cuisin's terms, that we should write on our indigenous literature and translate it. That would be, I think, but whatever we can do, we must tell what we can do. We must tell to ourselves, our students, that what we can do. Just showing up in seminars and webinars doesn't matter at all. Matters nothing. If I want to talk about freedom movement, I must talk about in Bengal, because Bengal produced huge literature in freedom. How many have been translated? We're busy what we do in England, France, Italy, Germany, Spain, the 5 so-called original contributor of Western hegemony and imperialism. These are the 5 imperialist countries. After all, we cannot say that Poland is an imperialist country. Professor Mahmoud, thank you very much. I cannot thank you enough, but does Satyajit still here?
Thank you. I enjoyed your comments and enjoyed the questions. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Let's everybody show their face. Satyajit still wants to ask you this. I would very much like Professor Mahmoud take up the question of leadership. Local leadership. Local leadership. No, this I have to hear you.
Sorry, you want me to talk about readership?
Leadership. Local leadership. Leadership. Local
Leadership.
Yes.
Okay, yeah, I've seen this question in the chat about local leadership of resistance literature. Yeah, well, I must confess that we only have a few people who are able to document what is happening there in Gaza. There are writers on the ground, and there are leaders of literature in the ground. But again, I know some of them, they are busy looking for food, water, and basic stuff for their kids. What they are doing actually most of the time, when they post their pictures on Facebook, each one of them lost a lot of weight, a lot of kilograms. And what they say is just fragmented lines about their destroyed, ruined life. They don't have electricity, they don't have laptops, they don't have connection. If they steal a moment to write about their lives, they just write 1-2 lines about their inability to document or to write. But some of them actually write so powerful depictions when they have time. I know friends who write literature, but again, most of the time they are occupied with daily life survival techniques.
Satyajit, you got the answer? What are your problems?
Yeah, thank you very much. Satya? Satyajit. Thank you very much, Satyajit, for your comments and for the question.
So that we can take a picture. Can everybody show their faces?
What is that?
So, everybody come on others, please show your faces so that we can take a picture. Chandra,
Oh, yes, yes. Yeah, sure.
অশোক আপনি আপনার ফেস যদি আছেন
Thank you.
চন্দ্র সঙ্গীতা বলি Thank you very much. Do join in our next one is on 29th of August. Medina, I cannot pronounce that it's so. So Medina will be speaking on decoloniality from Sweden. Same time.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Actually,
Thanks for having me. Thanks for the invitation. And
Thank
again,
you.
apologies for the time mismanagement.
Okay, but do see your emails more frequently.
Sure, sure. Okay.
Okay, thank you. Bye.
Bye. Bye bye for now. Bye bye. Bye bye. See you. Bye bye.
এই কজন দেখানোর ছবিটা দেওয়া উচিত না
কেন? Who is afraid of Virginia Woolf? But it's good to show this picture to perhaps provoke others into thinking